Hey guys, first of all, I want to start off this video by apologizing for not uploading as frequently as I used to. My personal life has just been kind of crazy right now. I recently got a new job, I recently moved, and I'm actually about to move again pretty soon, so I've been pretty busy lately, and when I come home every day after a long day's work, doing any of these videos is just one of the last things to cross my mind. So I haven't been learning new songs or writing any new material. So if you were looking forward to that, I'm sorry. I'm doing my best though. The reason I could upload as frequently as I did a while ago was because I had all these old videos pre-recorded that I had been saving up for about 2 years, and then I just kind of mass uploaded them all at once over the series of a few weeks. Looking back, I probably should have tried to spread it out a little more, because if you go way back into my videos, there are some where it's like 13 of them were uploaded in one day, and I have a life. But anyways, yeah, as you might have been able to tell, I got a new camera. It can shoot in 4K, however it overheats, and there's a timer to prevent that from happening. So for longer videos like this, I can only shoot in 1080p, but still it's better than the 480p and 720p videos of the past. But anyways, album reviews. I've been doing concert reviews for a while just because they were kind of a unique thing. No one really does them on YouTube. No one really does them in general, so I figured it would be fun to talk about those, but I haven't gone to a concert in a while. And I'm going to see Dream Theater April 23rd, though. Radio City Music Hall, baby. It should be a great show. But anyways, album reviews, I figure I might as well sell out and try to use another new series of videos to help pad things out. So anyways, the first album I'm going to review, just because it's brand new and I happen to have the CD lying around, and I don't have very many CDs at this particular location at the moment. Dream Theater's The Astonishing, and no, I'm not going to make the joke that it's astonishing. It's fairly astonishing. It's not Dream Theater's greatest work, but I'll get more into that later. I'll start off by saying I can at least respect this album because this was a very ambitious thing for Dream Theater to do. They haven't really done anything like this, because first of all, it's their first concept album since 1999. That was Scenes from a Memory Part 2. Also, there's 34 songs, the longest of which is 7.5 minutes. I mean, that's unheard of for Dream Theater. This is only, I think, one of 3 Dream Theater albums that doesn't have at least one song longer than 10 minutes. Because their debut album, all those songs are like 5 minutes long. Images and Words, the longest song is Metropolis Part 1, and that's only 9.5 minutes. But still, musically, this album is pretty different, because and to be honest, it was actually pretty refreshing to hear this, and it kept my interest in the album as I listened to it going, because the last 15 years or so, like 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence onward, Dream Theater has really been using this same style, the same heavy guitar tones, like 7 strings, just like all this. It's a unique brand, it's their own sound, but they keep a lot of their songs on a lot of their newer albums just sound the same. It's the same, like, epic sounding, progressive, crazy, complex stuff. And while, yes, it is very impressive, it does get kind of boring to listen to after a while, to be honest. So the break in that style kind of helped me get through this album, even though this album is far too long. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes. I think it was kind of hard to get through it just because of the length. Just me personally, about an hour of this album could have been shaved off. I would rather have 60, 70, or 80 minutes of really good music as opposed to 2 hours of mostly just like decent to good stuff. Let's see here. I'm just looking at my notes that I wrote for this, just balancing them on my knee. But anyways, the concept of this concept album, it's kind of important to have a good concept for a concept album. Now, personally, this is just me. I think John Petrucci ripped off the concept for this album from 2112. Now, stick with me on this, because the story is, more than a century into the future, this oppressive force that hates music takes over and is oppressive, and out of nowhere, our hero decides to rebel because he finds the magic of real music, and he presents it to the higher power, and they say, "Oh, you can't show us that music because it's ancient and inferior." And our hero says, "Oh, yes, I can. Oh, no, you can't. Oh, yes, I can. Oh, no, you can't." And our hero ends up overcoming hardships, and at the end of the day is able to defeat the oppressive power, and the true music prevails. Does any of that sound familiar? Except the ending, because in 2112, our hero commits suicide, actually, and the people who overthrow the evil power are the cavalry, who, like, if you listen to 2112, at the end of the overture, there's the sound of a rocket taking off, and that rocket taking off is the survivors, who eventually, it's hinted at in the chapter called The Oracle. I think that's what it's called, the 5th chapter in the song. And then at the end, when they say, "We have assumed control," that's them coming back and defeating the Red Star Federation, or whatever. But anyways, enough about 2112. Let's talk about this album, The Astonishing. Before I get into the music itself, I just want to show you this CD case that I got, because Dream Theater is awesome. Even though I'm not the biggest Dream Theater fan in the world, I still think they're incredible and they deserve my money, even though about 15% of that money will actually go to the band and the rest is probably going to go to the record company. But anyways, we got both discs here and the album booklet that you can't remove. It's just kind of stapled in there. But yeah, they kind of went all out with this. There's a map of the fictional world, there's concept artwork, there's lyrics for all the songs, and they even say which characters are speaking during which parts. I mean, they really went all out with this. And that reminds me, a complaint I've been hearing about the album is the lyrics are bad. In my opinion, they're not bad so much as they are just dialogue. Most of the lyrics in this album are just dialogue spoken by the characters, and I guess when you have dialogue as lyrics, they're not as ambiguous, they're not as open to interpretation. Maybe that might be why some people are getting mad at it, but I don't know. I've only listened to this album twice, so I may have to take another look at it to see if the lyrics really hold up. And there's no pictures of the band members themselves in this album booklet, but there are pictures of the characters. Yeah, we have the evil lord, the ruler, our main character, the female supporting character, and just more concept artwork. But yeah, I should actually start talking about the music now. I forget if I mentioned it before, but musically this album is basically more or less just like a rock opera in Dream Theater's style. Because like I said, the tracks are shorter, the lyrics are mostly just dialogue that the characters are saying. It sounds very theatrical, like I could actually see a staged production of this somewhere, which is actually pretty cool. It would be something neat to see. Let's see here. Oh, and when I first listened to the album, the very first track is one of these gray ball tracks, as I like to call them. They're these interlude tracks, which are basically the sound of the electronic chatter, the digital noises that the machines are making, because the concept is, what if everything in the future is automated, even music, like machines are making music and not people. Like, so I guess, I don't know if that's the actual music, because they're basically like dark ambient tracks with dubstep noises. I mean, it literally sounds like a Death Cube K track produced by Skrillex. Like, you would never hear this on any other Dream Theater album, and I respect that for trying something new, because as I mentioned before, like, their style is getting kind of old, and I really wish they would go back to their 90s, more like glam metal, 80s influenced style that kind of died out with Falling Into Infinity. Metropolis Part 2 was kind of the bridge between those two styles, between their old 80s influenced style and their more modern heavy metal influenced style, like modern metal. But anyways, a lot of the tracks do kind of sound the same, which is kind of weird because musically this album is pretty diverse. I was going to go more into the individual band members later, but I guess I could start with them now. Jordan, if you're a keyboardist, this is a great album to check out because Jordan really shines. His playing is awesome. He does a lot of piano playing on this album, which you don't really hear much of Jordan doing that. So that was nice to hear. Like, and you also hear a lot of stuff that he also wouldn't really do on any of the other albums, like horn sections. Like, I remember the overture for 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence had some horns in it, but other than that, I don't remember anything else Jordan would do with horns. But yeah, Jordan's great. John, his playing is a little more, John Petrucci, I mean, there's 2 Johns in the band. His playing is a little more restrained than it normally is. Like, his style is simpler. I think that just might have to do with the influence. He was probably listening to a lot of, like, more 70s classic rock to kind of get that rock opera vibe out of this. but still put Dream Theater's style in it. And I mean, it still sounds like John Petrucci. It's that Music Man tone. It's that he does like a fair bit of sweep picking in places. The solos are also fairly restrained. There are some parts where he goes crazy, but not nearly as much as he would normally do on other albums, because not every track has to have a guitar solo, you know. John Mayung, you don't really hear a lot of Mayung on this album, and I mean, Mayung just in general likes to be kind of low in the mix, so you never really hear Mayung's playing, but still, he's an incredible bassist, and he's just one of those members you don't really appreciate until he's not there. And he's not really there on this album. And as a bass player myself, well, that's just one of the instruments I play, but like as a bass player, it's kind of disappointing. Especially because Jordan utilizes the low end of his piano and his keyboards a lot in this album, so that kind of overpowers the bass, like audibly. And Mike Mangini is probably the most disappointing because the drums on this album are really generic, and I miss Portnoy. Bring back Portnoy. But even still, Mike Mangini is still a really incredible drummer, and he did a lot of awesome stuff with the two prior Dream Theater albums that he's been on. Like, he can write some really cool sounding drum parts. It's just that he really restrained himself here, and I think the reason for that is because this album was more or less just a passion project from John Petrucci. Like, it was his vision from the beginning, and he really was into it. And because I know John and Jordan are pretty close, Jordan was able to be very creative on this album, but the other members were probably not as on board, or at least they probably at least weren't as involved in the album's conception, or maybe even its execution, I don't know. But Labríe's singing on this album is pretty interesting. I personally don't really like James Labrie as a singer. It's mostly just the timbre of his voice. It's kind of whiny sounding, but he still sounds really good on this album. Like, because Dream Theater only has one vocalist, but there's like 8 characters in the story, he has to change the way he sings for each one of the characters. Like, as the main protagonist, he'll sing in his normal James Labrie voice. For the oppressive ruler, Lord Nefarious, I think his name is, he'll like do his like shouty metal voice. And then for the like female roles, he'll do like his softer, more ballad type voice. So from a vocal perspective, this album is pretty interesting, and I'd say James did a pretty good job with it. Even though I don't like the timbre of his voice that much, I will admit he sounds really good. He has obviously been doing a lot of training with his voice, because on this album and the previous 2 albums in particular, I think is when he sounded his best ever. So whatever he's been doing with his voice, he's obviously been trying to sound better, and I think it's been working pretty well for him. But anyways, let's see, rating time. If you were wondering if I'm going to give this a rating, yes, I'm going to give this a rating. An interesting thing I've noticed about this album is that Dream Theater fans haven't really had a single consensus on this yet. Like, from a fan perspective, the fans have been having really mixed reactions to this album, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, it's their first concept album in a long time, and their only other concept album is Metropolis Part 2, which, as we all know, it's like their greatest album. So people are holding it up to such a high standard, and they were thinking this is going to be the next Metropolis Part 2 when it wasn't as good as Metropolis Part 2, and they felt really let down. And also another reason I think is because this album is brand new and it hasn't really had enough time to make an impression on people. Like, for all we know, this album could age well and it will become more appreciated as time goes on, at least within the Dream Theater fan circle. Or for all we know, it might not age well, and after like 5 or 10 years, people are going to start saying, hey, you know that album, The Astonishing, and how everyone was saying it was astonishing? It kind of sucked. Well, and I'm not saying this album sucks. Far from it. I think it is a well put together album. There's some production issues, but musically, it's very good. It's pretty unique sounding. But anyways, the rating. I spend a lot of time when it comes to music reviews, like just for fun. Sometimes I'll look up just album reviews on Sputnik Music, which is my favorite music reviewing website. If you look in the upper right-hand corner of an album review, it shows all the user ratings for the album, because a lot of the reviews are written like by the staff, which are like actual music critics, but in the upper right hand corner you can see all the user reviews as well, and it's usually a bar graph, like how many gave it a 1, how many gave it a 1.5, how many gave it a 2, how many gave it a 2.5, and so on and so forth until how many gave it a 4.5, how many gave it a 5 out of 5. And usually the bar graph is just a hill like that. Well, not that drastic, but it's like that, more or less. So if the average score is, let's say, a 3, it'll peak at a 3, then come back down. If it's a 4, it'll peak at a 4, then come down. If it's only a 2, it'll peak at a 2, then come down with very few 5 out of 5s. This album on that site is all over the place. The bar graph for this album is a roller coaster, because it's like 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5 out of 5. Just, there's no clear consensus on this album. Me personally, just because it's 2 discs, I am going to give disc 1 a 4 out of 5, and even then I feel like I'm being kind of generous. And then I'm going to give disc 2 a 3 out of 5, which brings my overall rating of this album to a 3.5 out of 5, which I'd say is still pretty respectable. The reason I liked the first disc more was just because there are more and better, more interesting and better musical ideas on the first disc. The second disc, to be honest, I was just kind of skipping through it the first time I listened to it anyway, just because it's after 78 minutes of the first disc, you're just like, oh, I have to listen to another 50 more minutes of music. But anyways, I guess in short, those are my thoughts on this album. Let's see. Yeah, this video's been running kind of long. I'm going to try to keep my album reviews a little shorter. But anyways, what did you think of this album if you've listened to it. What albums do you think I should review next if you want me to keep doing album reviews? What did you think of this review? Just let me know in the comments below, and maybe we could get some discussions going down there too. But yeah, I'm just starting this new series, trying to pad things out a bit, trying to get myself a little more interested in doing this stuff again because, like I said, I just haven't really had the motivation to do it. So, yeah, let me know, and yeah, bye.